Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Janthir Wilds came out a couple days ago. I've played it for a few hours now, and I just wanted to give kind of my initial impression on it. I actually haven't even unlocked the second map yet. There's still a long way to go, and the content that they have released so far already seems like it's on a way bigger scale than what we saw in Secrets of the Obscure. The first takeaway I noticed right off the bat is there is a lot more emphasis on storytelling and kind of the presentation of that storytelling. There's more cinematics, and the dialogue seems a lot more purposeful and intentional. So I won't give too much away in terms of like story spoilers, because I'm actually still going through it myself anyway, and that's not really what this is for. There will be some kind of visual spoilers, so if you're just listening, you'll probably be fine. But maybe just listen if you want to avoid anything like that. So story starts with the commander joining the Tyrian Alliance. Everybody meets in Lion's Arch, and it's kind of a United Nations sort of organization that's being formed after the events of Soto, just to address any like future threats. And it's kind of interrupted by Isgarin telling everybody that there's something happening in Janthir, and despite the fact that he clearly knows a lot more than he's letting on, he's pretty tight-lipped about it. After a few more story segments, we kind of get rushed into the new map, into the first map. It's called Lowland Shore, and you start with a floating chunk of what looks like Wizard's Tower. And from there, you kind of just set out and explore and interact with the wildlife. The whole expansion has a much slower, kind of more chill vibe to it than the rest of than Soto did. And that comes through in a lot of the decisions they made. Like, for example, on the first map at least, there are no meta events, but you almost wouldn't notice if you weren't being told, because the entire map is just covered in events constantly. There were times where there were so many events in the event guide in the top right that I couldn't keep track of which one I was standing in and which one was nearby. There's always something to do, and it actually makes it a lot easier than previous expansions to build up those masteries and run through those mastery tracks. So that's kind of nice. And they did a pretty good job of giving you like variety of different events. There's definitely some recycled mechanics that you've probably seen from elsewhere in the game. Like, there's no shortage of pick up the thing and drop it in the basket type of events. But there's also some that are a lot more interesting or use the Warclaw in new ways. I really like the Bog Queen boss. She's almost a meta event in herself, just because of like kind of the scale and difficulty of her. But her fight requires using the Warclaw both to stomp out the ads and also to like take her down with the chain pull. And I just think she's a really cool boss. She's basically the girl from The Ring, but with a Scottish, I think, accent. And she has some cool dialogue and just cool character design. Yeah, I really like her. There's a really cool kind of dance event that happens right outside the sort of main building in the hub town. It's kind of like the yoga phase during the Omnitas meta, but I actually think it's just more, it's way better executed. It's more in line with the theme of the Kodan. The music is really good. It's just a lot of fun. And I have to say, just speaking of that village, so far, everything I've seen in the expansion, these maps and these environments are beautiful. I had several moments where I just had to take a step back and look around and look at the sky and, actually enjoy the vistas instead of letting them just blind me and skipping them. It's a really, really good looking expansion. There's a lot of original content. You can definitely tell they made a lot of new models and textures. There's a few things where you can tell they're kind of recycling existing models. Also, I'm kind of getting Wheel of Time vibes from the main Kodan village, with the shape of the houses and even the music. The soundtrack is very different from previous Guild Wars, but it's really good. It's very well executed. It's a good combination of the sort of tribal drums and pan flutes and the throat singing, and it just comes together in a really good, really nice way. I think the music and the environments and everything also lend themselves really well to the Lowland Kodan. They're a lot more fleshed out and a lot more interesting, and they have a lot more dimension to them than Kodan we've seen in the past. You can notice there's a little accent tics that certain members of the village have. They did a really good job with giving them all sort of backstory and lore, and you can tell they've written them in a way where there's kind of more than what you see on the surface level, and I think that's just a sign of very good writing and kind of character development, even for what were otherwise fairly minor characters. And as I've been going through the story, I really appreciate how purposeful a lot of the writing is. It's definitely wordy. There is no shortage of just endless dialogue sequences that are a lot longer than you expect them to be. But they're not just filler. They actually are significant and important to the story. The Homestead Unlock story in particular is very nicely woven into the kind of main story. They set up the main character of the village, and then they give you some of his background, and that background is very neatly tied into why you're given the homestead. And the dialogue that happens in the story he tells you is actually kind of sweet and touching. It's a really nice kind of break from what we're used to in this game. And that kind of themes everything I've encountered in this expansion so far. It's kind of a break from traditional Guild Wars 2, but in a good way. You can definitely tell they've learned a lot from Secrets of the Obscure. They're a lot more focused in what story they want to tell and what experience they want the player to have. So far, I don't have a ton of critiques for it. Obviously, it's pretty early on still, and like I said, I'm actually still on the first map. I've been playing this for probably about 8 or 9 hours total, and I'm trying to actually get through the story at a decent pace, and I'm still on the first map, and there's still a lot to do. I just unlocked the homestead and progressed that mastery path just a little bit. But if I had to come up with critiques, they're like any expansion, you can tell there's a few models and skeleton rigs that are being reused, and that's okay. That's just part of game design. But they have done it in a way that's fairly responsible, and they've hidden them in a good way. Like they've added movesets to, skeletons that have been used in the past, but now with movesets that you haven't seen before. And if I weren't like staring at them trying to figure out what they were, you wouldn't notice that like the Minotaur model is being reused, for example. So I think it's forgivable because it's executed in a really nice way. And also, the only other thing that kind of jumps out at me is there is no shortage of visual noise with some of the sort of world trash mobs. Boy, they will cover the screen in some goop and you can't tell what's going on. You just have to dodge or block or stun break and hope for the best. So that's Guild Wars 2 has never had a shortage of visual noise, and this is certainly no exception. And then I think going forward, I'm kind of at the cautiously optimistic stage. This already seems like a massive improvement over Soto, and I'm really happy to see that. Again, you can tell ArenaNet learned a lot from Soto, and it stands to reason that with their first shift to this new yearly release model, they would have a lot of room for improvement, and they did, and it shows now that they have learned from it and grown. In the Homestead system, I haven't got to explore it very much because I only just unlocked it. But so far what I've seen is really impressive. It is a extremely well fleshed out system. If you don't already know, ArenaNet hired one of the devs from the Sims franchise, and that was a great decision. You can tell it has a level of polish that we normally wouldn't expect to see on a single feature from an expansion, but they did an amazing job on it. You have really free control over 3D models in terms of size and placement. They don't worry about clipping. You have a new crafting system, which is kind of obligatory. You have to sort of gate items in some way and require the player to kind of earn them, so that's fine. You can turn into a bee, so you can fly around and freely view and explore your homestead. And the homesteads themselves are just so well thought out, and they're so much more than just a house. It's really like an entire farm where you have like a sawmill and workbench and a mine, and you can see that like they've put a lot of thought and depth into this, and I really think that's going to be the crowning feature for this expansion. I'm not to say that's the only feature. I'm really excited about the raid we're going to get next release in a few months. And there's more to come after that. There's gonna be another fractal and some other endgame content, but this is definitely the expansion that people are gonna get for homesteads. And if you're somebody who likes player housing, I think this is going to be Guild Wars 2's mount moment, but with player housing. And by that I mean Guild Wars 2 didn't have mounts for the longest time, and it was criticized for it. And then when they finally did bring a mount system to the game, it was easily the best in the industry. I think that's what we're going to see with homesteads. It's early for me to tell, but from what I have seen, it's incredibly impressive, and I'm really excited about it. And that's coming from someone who otherwise didn't really care about player housing to begin with. It's that good. So if you care about housing, this is 100% for you. Like, just buy it if you haven't already. It's absolutely worth it. So yeah, just to recap, at least the first map is huge. It's beautiful. There's a ton to do. The events are interesting. Not much of it feels recycled, and what was done responsibly. The improvements to Warclaw are really cool. The housing system is amazing, and I can't wait to see what people do with it. This is a really exciting expansion. I'm really happy to see what we have so far, and I'm really excited to see what we get in the future. So I absolutely recommend checking this out. If you haven't already purchased it, definitely go pick it up. It's $25, I think it starts at. There's a $25, $50, and $75 tier. I'm not sponsored by ArenaNet or anything, but I bought the $75 tier because it's worth it if you're going to buy the gems anyway. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is a huge improvement over Secrets of the Obscure, even for the initial release, especially for the initial release. Soto had a fairly good initial release. I'd say most of the community was kind of 50-50 on it, but generally positive. This is a much stronger first release, and if ArenaNet can keep this momentum up and it doesn't go downhill with future releases, this will turn out to be a very, very strong expansion. Even just the first release alone, I think it's absolutely worth it. Anyway, that's my first impressions on Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, or JDub as I choose to call it. I hope you like this format. This was a little different for me. Normally I do very scripted stuff and I'm really rigid about it. I thought it would be a little more interesting to just have sort of a free-form yap session. So let me know what you think. If you've already played Janthir, please give me your thoughts in the comments. I'd be really interested to hear what everybody else thinks about it too. And otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.